Welcome to Within the Book, a series where we explore what's in the book of game design in tabletop role-playing games. With these companies announcing their open licenses and game systems, we want to give people the opportunity to look within the book, and so today we talk about the cause of and solution to all of RPG design problems, the core experience. I feel it's important when designing RPGs and games in general to incorporate mechanics and systems that reinforce the theme of your game. This is what I mean by a core experience. The core experience applies to anything you design. Think of it as your design's identity. A well-done core experience will do two things. One, it will differentiate your design, and two, it'll give your design an elegant and precise feeling. Let's look at some games and see how they define their core experience and how it's reinforced through various mechanics and systems. Wizards of the Coast describes D&D as taking you and your friends on epic journeys, becoming characters you create, battling deadly foes, uncovering secrets, finding treasure, and making memories that last a lifetime. All this is true and definitely is D&D's core experience, but things like combat, skills, dungeon delving, creating stories also define many other games. I think that D&D has been around so long that its core experience has changed to just being D&D. Because it's so common in the space and being so relevant in pop culture and influencing so much about role-playing games means its core experience is malleable and not as important to D&D's identity. The reason this is relevant is because while D&D's core experience is common, it is the first to do it. Nailing your core experience will differentiate yourself from the big guys of the industry, and to convince you of this, I'll point towards Blades in the Dark and Lancer. The Blades in the Dark website describes it as a tabletop role-playing game about a daring crew of scoundrels seeking their fortunes on the haunted streets of an industrial fantasy city. There are heists, chases, occult mysteries, dangerous bargains, bloody skirmishes, and above all, riches to be had if you're bold enough to seize them. There are three aspects in Blades in the Dark that, for me, contribute most to their core experience of a crew of daring scoundrels. The game structure of Blades in the Dark is what we call a gameplay loop. It follows what they call free play, the score, and downtime. This is a helpful framing tool for the GM and players as it breaks down the process into manageable chunks. Importantly, the mechanics within these phases, like the engagement and entanglement roles, reinforce this framing tool by providing GMs tools to interpret a role. Then you have flashbacks. The flashback mechanic is important as it enables the player experience of having a plan coming together. I feel it's also important to mention that the flashbacks are a great example of not limiting the play experience with excessive realism, but enhancing their experience by providing a tool that encourages creative ideas. My last example is the crew sheet. This allows the players to narrow their experience to the kind of crew they want to meaningfully engage with. Importantly, it also effectively roots the players in the setting and core experience of being a crew of daring scoundrels seeking their fortunes. Massive Press describes Lancer as an RPG about mechs and the pilots who crew them, featuring deep narrative play, gritty tactical combat, and broad customization. The designers of Lancer define their game structure through missions. Missions can be made up of narrative play and mech combat. Narrative play is intentionally designed to be more free-form. This is to allow player actions and individual roles to have greater impact and to have a wider application. This allows for what they call scenes to last longer than a structured period of time. Combat can happen in narrative play, but it's done with the pilot's skills rather than the mech's attacks. NPCs also react to the outcome of these skill checks rather than making attacks themselves. Mech combat, unlike narrative play, is highly structured. This is to the point that the designers of Lancer actively encourage people to use battle maps. The design of Lancer takes full advantage of the battle map through precise rules for movement and measurements. This lends what they describe as a gritty tactical feeling to the game. The customization of Lancer ties in heavily with mech combat. This is because the customization is mostly centered around the various mechanics of mechs. This is an intentional choice by the designers to further foster the feeling of tactical combat. But it also develops a comprehensive experience of being a mech pilot. Okay, how do we do it ourselves? First, you need to summarize your game, mechanic, or system into ideally one sentence, but it can be more. This should take the form of a definitive statement that uses words like is, about, or become. This statement will be your logline. Loglines for a mechanic or system are going to be very different from a game, so I'll be talking about them separately. Let's look at Blades in the Dark's logline. Blades in the Dark is a tabletop role-playing game about a crew of daring scoundrels seeking their fortunes on the haunted streets of an industrial fantasy city. I don't actually want to read this out because I've read it before. What I had this here and put that there is a reminder for us in the editing, because I want it to be edited in the screen and I want to highlight what parts are what. So what I'll do is I'll say, let's look at the Blades in the Dark logline, then I want you to skip. And then I'll go into specific details about how it's broken down. But when we're editing, it'll show this sentence and it'll highlight the part I wanted to talk about. Let's look at Blades in the Dark's logline. First, you have the what. What is the thing you're designing? This is not that important if you're designing for yourself, but if you have to present it to someone, it becomes more relevant. Next, you have the who. Who are the players? Then there's the why. Why are the players doing what they do? The where. This is the setting of your game. The how. This is the actions the player will be doing. Finally, they have a call to action. This is optional, but it can add some personality to your logline if you're presenting it to someone. We'll do the same thing. So if you look at this one, it'll say the what, the why, and the how. If you go back to the previous one, all that will also be split up in editing. So I don't have to read this gigantic fucking piece of text. They can just pause it.
So, Blades in the Dark.
I'll say, now let's look at the engagement role mechanic from Blades in the Dark, skip. The order of how these elements appear in your logline should be whatever makes most sense to you. Now, let's look at the engagement role mechanic from Blades in the Dark. Again, you have the what. What is the mechanic or system you're designing? Next, you have the why. Why does this system or mechanic exist? Lastly, you have the how. How does this mechanic work? There is more to this engagement role mechanic, but I don't want to give you the impression that this logline has to be a huge paragraph. After you've defined your core experience, you'll need to design some mechanics and systems that reinforce this core experience. This is easier said than done, but here are some tips I've picked up along the way. Often, games will use basic reoccurring mechanics or systems like rolling dice, classes, experience, encounters, stuff like that. This is what we call a design pattern. Look to different types of games, tabletop role-playing games, board games, video games, that all have a similar core experience to your game. Use the way they've tackled their core experience as inspiration for yours. Look to other forms of media that cover a similar topic. Movies, TV shows, and books are good to look at. Compare the commonalities between these forms of media. This should tell you the elements that are most important and what you should focus on for your core experience. Within the book, we'll be relating the topic of each video to the game we're making here at Confused Wizards. Our core experience is, behind the scenes is a tabletop role-playing game about a larger-than-life cast of characters on a once-utopian world that was struck by an ecological disaster that turned it into a hostile and strange landscape. Unbeknownst to your characters, they are the main cast of one of many reality shows on this world that entertain a vast universe of viewers. The first way we tried reinforcing the core experience is through a resource every character has that we're calling plot armor. The intention of plot armor is to enable players to succeed or avert disaster at key moments due to their importance to the plot of the show. The next is our experience system, which we're calling your character's popularity. As a character's popularity increases, the character receives additional bonuses and abilities that are themed around character writing tropes. Finally, our Fallout mechanic is an attempt to systemize seemingly random events orchestrated by an unknown force. Currently, Fallout is received from dice rolls and is triggered in various ways. When a Fallout is triggered, the number of Fallout received previously helps the GM determine the severity of the Fallout event. I'm not entirely happy with the way Fallout works, but we'll be covering this as a topic for a future video. Thanks for watching the video. Let us know what you want to hear about next time. Do all those YouTube things and we'll see you next time. I'm not entirely happy.